For our Weekly Insider, we're asking, is Canada prepared for a social media cyber attack like the one that tilted the 2016 U.S. elections? 13 Russians were indicted just over a week ago for meddling with that U.S. campaign.
The defendants posed as politically and socially active Americans, advocating for and against particular candidates. They established social media pages and groups to communicate with unwitting Americans. They also purchased political advertisements on social media networks.
The Russian operatives published Facebook ads like this, targeting specific groups of Americans and designed to push them into more radical ideology, inflaming both the right and the left. The Russians also used social media to pose as American citizens and organize pro- and anti-Trump rallies to incite conflict. Sometimes they were on the same day, at the same time, in the same city, like this one in Houston. So what about Canada? Most Canadians use Facebook, and half of those get their news from it, including some of that fake news. So should we be concerned? Karina Gould is Minister of Democratic Institutions. She's here with me now. Thank you for coming in. You're about to have a baby.
Yeah,
about to
1 week away. So
really?
Thank you for having me,
Oh,
Wendy.
well, thank you for coming in. Yeah. So, yeah. We've heard from the United States what's happened there, that the Facebook in particular was flooded with these hateful posts. Yeah. What's happening here? We haven't been told.
So when I was appointed to Cabinet about a year ago by the Prime Minister, one of the key parts of my mandate was cybersecurity and elections. And over the past year, we've learned a lot about what that means, particularly from the American example, but from other examples around the world as well. And so what we're looking at is, ensuring that we have the laws in place that prevent foreign intervention, but also working with and talking to social media companies about what we need to be doing together to prevent this from happening in Canada.
So what is the situation now? What is the state of fake news or hate speech that Canadians are being inundated with?
Well, that's something that we need to be looking at because, quite frankly, we haven't been looking at that until now. Facebook, Twitter, and Google all launched, some initiatives in the fall to prepare for the federal election in 2019.
But can't you make them tell us? They must have an idea.
Well, so I think it's one of those things that unless you're looking for it, you're not going to find it. And so social media companies obviously have a responsibility to ensure that they're playing by the rules that each country has established. And so those are the conversations that we're having now.
So there's no rules here, so they don't have to tell us?
No, there are rules in the Canada Elections Act, but social media platforms, are not kind of explicitly listed in the Canada Elections Act. So part of what I'm doing is making sure that those values and principles that our democracy is based on are being respected by social media platforms as well.
Well, it's so complicated because they act as a non-traditional media, so the regular rules of transparency, the regulations don't apply. France and Germany have moved to sort of say, we're going to have laws to regulate them more. Yeah. If they're making all of this money and they're allowing all of this information out there, should they be treated like a regular media company?
So social media platforms will say no, right? But I think what we're seeing is that ultimately, as you mentioned, Canadians are getting a lot of their news from Facebook, from Google, from Twitter, from other social media platforms.
Well, what do you think?
But they are information arbiters, right?
Right.
They are, really kind of defining what Canadians see and how they see it and when they see it. And so those are the conversations that I'm having with them. And really,
what do you think? Should they be regulated?
This is a whole of government approach. I think it's really good that we're having this public conversation because I think Canadians need to be aware of just how that information is being targeted at them. And I think that we should be, moving to make sure that those principles of free speech, those principles of, being able to access information in a transparent manner are being upheld.
Because, it's not hard to find. This took us 5 minutes to find. Yep. There's stuff like this all over sites that Canadians are on. This is the Prime Minister with a target over his face.
Yeah, and I've had many...
Can't you move more quickly? They're moving. We know this is an issue.
And that's what's interesting about the German example, right, is that they had been talking to social media companies for 2 years, but until they actually did the regulations, nothing changed. I'm not sure the German example is the one that we want here in Canada, but at the same time...
And that's banning hate speech. The French one is banning
fake news.
Fake news.
Yeah, and so we want to make sure that we still have that freedom of speech here in Canada, but there are limits, and we have to understand what are credible threats. And sometimes people will say, well, it's just a post on social media, but when someone acts on it, that becomes a credible threat. And so
you've said fix it or else.
Yeah, so we're still working.
Can you fix this? There's elections coming in 2 provinces soon, federal elections soon.
Yeah.
It's a big impact on democracy. What can you actually... Are you going to Bigfoot them if they don't do something?
Well, so where we are right now is we want to see internal changes happening within the companies. The tricky part is because they're, outside of the regulations at the moment. We have no way of actually confirming whether those have happened.
You can change the rules.
But that's also a possibility, and that's why it's really good that we're having this public conversation right now, because I think there needs to be the support from Canadians to also demand that change to happen.
A lot to watch for there, and you got a new baby coming.
Yeah.
So, I hope you have... Thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for asking me about these issues because they're very important.
Thank you. Karina Gould.